was introduced simply as a model produced by the Rover brand in 1948, a company that dates back to 1878 and started building cars in 1907. Although the Land Rover design was inspired by the World War II Willys Jeep, it was not simply a copy. Unlike other products of its type at the time, it was designed with doors, a box frame, and an aluminum body. It was 132 inches long on an 80-inch wheelbase and 2,600 pounds, and initially powered by a 1.6-liter inline-4 with 50 horsepower and 80 pound-feet of torque. In 1951, Rover received a royal warrant, allowing them to advertise that they supplied Land Rovers to the royal family. And the following year, they upgraded to a bigger 2-liter 4, adding 3 horsepower and 21 pound-feet of torque. In 1954, the standard wheelbase would be stretched 6 inches, and a longer pickup version was added on a 107-inch wheelbase, that a year later would be used for a long 5-door wagon version. Both wheelbases gained another 2 inches for 1956, and a 2-liter diesel was also added. The second series Land Rover arrived in 1958 with a wider, more modern body, and would be upgraded to a bigger 2.3-liter engine with 77 horsepower and 124 pound-feet of torque. Rover would become part of Leyland in 1960, and in 1962, the diesel would also increase to 2.3 liters, when a cab-forward or forward control version was added to the line. In 1967, a 2.6-liter straight 6 became available on long wheelbase versions, offering 96 horsepower and 133 pound-feet of torque, just before Leyland merged with British Motors to become British Leyland. In 1970, the Land Rover was joined by the Range Rover, a somewhat upmarket and more refined 2-door wagon. It was 176 inches long on a 100-inch wheelbase and 3,800 pounds, powered by the GM Rover 3.5-liter V8, with 130 horsepower and 154 pound-feet of torque. And the third series Land Rover arrived the following year. Changes were primarily cosmetic, but it would go on to become the most successful model, selling 440,000 over 15 years. In 1978, Land Rover would be spun off from Rover to become its own brand that included both the Land Rover and Range Rover models, not confusing anyone at all. Starting in 1981, the Range Rover would be offered as a 4-door. There would be an updated Land Rover model introduced in 1983, although the Series 3 would continue on for some time. The new model would be named for its wheelbase, initially as the 110, being joined by the 90 and 127 in 1984 and 85. By 1990, these models had adopted the Defender name, with the 127 being extended to a 130. Around the same time, the Discovery was introduced, essentially a more affordable spin-off of the Range Rover line, intended to fend off the increasing competition from imports. Although the original Range Rover would carry on for a couple of years as the classic, a new Range Rover was introduced in 1994. It was 186 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase, and the V8 was enlarged to 4 liters for 190 horsepower. A BMW diesel would also be added to the options list, as around the same time, BMW would take over the Rover Group, or what remained of British Leyland. The compact Freelander was introduced in 1997. It was 175 inches long on a 101-inch wheelbase, with either a 1.8-liter gas or 2-liter diesel engine. In spite of not having a low range or locking differential, it was still a far superior off-roader than the cute utes from Japan. The next year, the Discovery would see numerous updates, but it was still based on the original Range Rover. And the year after that would see the Rover V8 enlarged to a 4.6-liter, raising output to 230 horsepower. Then in 2000, BMW would break up the Rover Group and sell Land Rover to Ford. The following year, there would be an all-new Range Rover, developed around BMW parts, including their 4.4-liter V8. But in 2005, they would transition from BMW-sourced parts to Ford Jaguar-sourced parts. They were 195 inches long and 113-inch wheelbase, and weighed 5,400 to 5,700 pounds. And the new models would keep coming, including an all-new Discovery for 2004, also called the LR3, up to 191 inches long on a 114-inch wheelbase, still sharing its engines with the Range Rover. and it would be joined by a slightly smaller version as the Range Rover Sport in 2005, only 187 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase and 5,500 pounds, with a 2.7-liter turbo diesel V6 with 188 horsepower, or the 295 horsepower Jaguar 4.4-liter V8. It would soon be followed by a new Freelander, also marketed as the LR2, up to 177 inches long on a 105-inch wheelbase and 3,900 to 4,300 pounds, initially with a 230 horsepower 3.2-liter Volvo 6 or an 150 horsepower Peugeot 2.2-liter diesel. And as also part of Ford's premier automotive group, soon Volvo would get its own version as the XC60, just in time for Ford to sell Jaguar Land Rover to Tata of India. But that didn't slow down the string of new models, as there would be an updated Discovery, or LR4, for 2009, with a 2.7 or 3-liter turbo diesel V6, or 215 horsepower 4-liter gas V6, or 370 horsepower 5-liter V8. The 2012 Evoque was a smaller technological step forward with carbon fiber panels, biofuel-compatible diesels, a stop-start system, and an advanced hybrid powertrain, only 172 inches long on a 105-inch wheelbase, and 3,500 to 3,700 pounds. Much of its technology would carry over to the new Range Rover the following year, with extensive use of aluminum construction, and a longer wheelbase version would be added the year after that, stretching it to 205 inches long on a 123-inch wheelbase and weighing 5,200 pounds, followed almost immediately by a new Range Rover Sport, receiving a similar treatment. For 2014, the Freelander was replaced by the Discovery Sport. It was slightly larger at 181 inches long on a 108-inch wheelbase and weighing 3,800 to 4,100 pounds, soon to become the brand's best-selling model, moving to Jaguar Rover's new line of Ingenium modular gas and diesel engines for 2015, initially in turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder versions of 188 to 237 horsepower. These and bigger 3-liter V6 versions would find their way into the new, bigger Discovery of 2017, which was up to 195 inches long on a 115-inch wheelbase and 4,900 pounds. Fitting into its previous size slot was the new Velar, developed off the Jaguar F-Pace, being 189 inches long on a 113-inch wheelbase and 3,900 to 4,300 pounds, with the same 2- and 3-liter engines with up to 375 horsepower. It would be Land Rover's best year for sales. There would be a new Evoque for 2019 with up to 300 horsepower, and a new long wheelbase version that was 178 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase, weighing 4,400 pounds. After a 4-year hiatus, there would be a new Defender for 2020. It was once again offered as a 90, 110, and 130, although the 90 used a 101-inch wheelbase and the others a 119-inch wheelbase, with an available 5-liter V8 putting out 518 horsepower. In 2022, there would be a new Range Rover and Range Rover Sport sharing an 118-inch wheelbase, with an available 126-inch long wheelbase version. They would also see the return of a variety of BMW-sourced engines that included up to a twin-turbo 4.4-liter V8 with 523 horsepower. Although they are still capable off-roaders, Land Rover, and more specifically Range Rover, have become the epitome of the luxury SUV in the eyes of many, and sales remain strong, in spite of a market that has become saturated with SUVs from companies with much less off-road tradition. And as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.